This is Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium.
Today's guest is Rick Hughes. Rick is a Canadian-born lead singer of the legendary heavy metal band Sword. Sword was formed in 1981, Metallized 1986, Sweet Dreams 1988, The Best of Sword 2006, Live Hammersmith 2016, 2022, and the hard rock band Saints and Sinners 1992. During his career, he has played hundreds of headline shows and has opened for Metallica, Motorhead, Metal Church, Alice Cooper, Bon Jovi, Warlock, Anthrax, Black Label Society, Rob Zombie, Marilyn Manson, WASP, Helix, Styx, and Lee Aaron. He is blessed with a great range and a powerful voice. Rick has performed in the United States, Canada, Europe, and Japan, and is highly respected rock and metal vocalist internationally. His main influences are Robert Plant, Ronnie James Dio, Rob Halford, and French legend Johnny Hallyday. His new solo album, Redemption, was produced by John Webster, Aerosmith, Tom Cochrane, Motley Crue, etc., in Vancouver and Los Angeles, and features some of the top metal and rock musicians in the world, including an incredible reunion for its first single and video. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for the beautiful intro.
Oh, well, this is your life, Rick. This is your life, and I'm so very honored to even speak with you. I am kind of a very big 1980s heavy metal fan, and a lot of my friends, we always talk about all the bands from the 80s, and it's so great to see a lot of those bands come back around again and to return, because as I look around when I go out and see them play live, I'm not seeing people my age. I'm seeing younger people too, and I'm like, right on, that's great.
Yeah, it is great. Sometimes people ask me, will you ever retire? And I answer, do you retire from doing something you love to do?
Yes,
You
yes.
don't?
Yes. That really reminds me of something that I had seen recently. Over the last year, I'm a huge Triumph fan. And you remember Triumph, right? So they're a Canadian group too, For many, many years, I followed them, when they were at the really big heights. And I almost bought a ticket, and I was like, I'm going to go to Canada and watch them. And I watched a video, and Rick actually talks in between the songs. And towards the end of like maybe an 8 to 10 song set, he said, I came back on the road to like see if I could do this again. And it's helping me see if I really want to do this again. It's helping me process that. And I was like smiling. And then he says, I'm not sure if I do, And I was like, oh, but it's great that it was filmed, But it is very true. And he made a couple of points like, the older we get, we may not be able to hit the high notes anymore. And, if you're playing an instrument, you have to remember the chord coordinations. And it's a lot of pressure, And nowadays, it's even more pressure because everyone's got the phone and the recording. And back in the 80s, nobody had a phone or nobody was really recording other than the big camera set. So it is, I could see the pressure. So do you know Rick?
Well, no, I don't know him personally, but I went and worked at his studio, Metalwork studio in Toronto a couple of times. But I can imagine, because this guy had such a powerful and high note voice, plus his guitar playing was so intricate with the voice. I mean, yeah, sometimes we don't think about that. Like me, I'm getting older. I find it easier to sing the song because with time, I got techniques and stuff. But it's another thing when you have to play the guitar, hit the high notes like he did. You know what? In a certain way, there's a parallel between him and Geddy Lee of Rush, because both have that high voice that was almost a female place where they would sing, And of course, Geddy Lee would play the bass while he was doing those very high notes and very hard melody to sing. And sometimes he would play the bass and he would play with the pedal board. I mean, That's incredible. Yeah, for those guys, it must be harder to go back on the road. Not for me. For me, it's like a walk in the park. I really
That's
mean that.
awesome. That is so awesome because I'm so excited to see what's going to be coming up for you. And on top of that, I want to bring in the song that you're releasing is The Real Me by The Who. In this New York City area, just maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I saw The Who live, and I saw them in New Jersey. And I'm a veteran. I actually won 4 tickets. So I brought 3 girls that I know. And we were like, oh my God. I mean, we were like on our feet. We felt like we were 16, we knew every song. And like you said, the band had so much power. But that song, The Real Me, it's funny because as the concert started, my friend Donna, she's like, how many Who songs do you know? And I'm like, I don't know, 4 or 5. And she looked at me like, 4 or 5? The set's got at least 17 songs. And she showed me the list. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's them. Oh, yeah, that's them. Like, there's so many songs that you almost feel like you forget about until you see the name of it. And you're like, that's The Who. So you selected The Real Me. And that, I have to be honest, that has been one of my very favorite songs. And the concept behind that song, about the whole thing, Tommy, they did this Broadway thing many years ago, but I had to go back and look up the meaning of that song, The Real Me. And it's about a boy named Jimmy, and he's struggling, apparently, the myth goes, with 4 different personalities. The words to that, really interesting, because you figure this song came out in the 70s, right? The only thing I could think of that came out in the 70s talking about multiple personalities was a very popular movie called Sybil. Do you remember that movie?
Of course I do.
Yeah. So I want to see how you picked the song, what the song means to you. Do you remember when it came out? Because to me, the way you guys do it, it's just amazing.
Well, it all came about when I chose a couple of songs to be on the album, and then I was looking for a title that would represent who I am today. So as you can see, I have an accent. I come from Quebec, French-speaking part of Canada. So I was looking for a word that you could say in French and in English. And then I came up with the idea of redemption, because that's where I'm at in my life since at least 10 years. I'm the kind of guy that introspects a lot in the morning and at night. In the morning, I stay calm, I drink coffee, and I think about the day. What will I do to make it better for me, and then for my girlfriend, and then for my children, and for my dogs? But I always come back to me. So redemption means a lot. To me, redemption is a way of saying that you make peace with all that you've done and all that you will do. Because if, let's say, you've done something wrong in the past and you make peace with it, it means you won't redo it. Or if you redo it, it's just that you forgot about it, and you will appease yourself because you're in a redemption mode. You want to get better. You don't want to get worse. You don't want to become a hater. You don't want to become I'm a lover. I love life. I love people. I love music. So it's all the concept. The concept of the album is about that. It's about a grown man talking about not heavy stuff, light stuff. Sometimes people think you have to go deep, deep in order to turn on a new leaf. No, you don't. No, you don't. You just have to talk to yourself and admit what you've done wrong and move on, and just move on and just admit that. That's redemption to me. And to me, being in that mode brings peace of mind. And peace of mind is the only way for me to be happy, if I'm at peace with myself. Not the people around me, just me. Then if there's a war, if there's anything happens in the family, that's I'm gonna stay calm, and people will come to me because they know that I've got that ability to stay calm. So anyways, it's a long story to explain why The Real Me. But when I listened to it, I knew the song from a way back when it came out back in '74. You know what? The song came out the day of my birthday. I'm born on the January 12th, 1963. It came out January 12th, 1974. But I knew that after. That's my manager that told me that a couple of weeks ago. I said, oh, wow, that's strange. But that's the concept of the album. Each song represents something that to me is important.
Well, that's incredible. And I wanted to mention two other songs because I went down the list of songs and you have historically you always have the A side and the B side. And I looked at the names of all the songs and I said, let me just pick out two that are actually jumping off the page at me. And I haven't heard them, but I feel intrigued to ask about them. The first one is Shake My Soul. What is that?
For now, that's the favorite song on my album. It was written by Brad Gillis and David Sykes, who played with Boston. And it was offered to me. And when I first heard it, I said, wow, that's my song. It's a blend of hard rock, blues rock. It's reminiscent of good Whitesnake type of song. And like you said, the title jumped at me because I'm all about that. I'm all about that. Each human is unique just because of their soul. It's the soul that makes me unique. It's my soul. That's the only thing that's Rick. So for an album that's called Redemption, Shake My Soul was a no-brainer to me, especially since it's Brad Gillis that wrote it. So it's a real good rocker. One of the rockers of the album.
That's perfect. Now, the next one that jumped out to me is called Someday.
Oh, we were talking earlier about Aldo Nova. So this is the song I wrote.
Yes, I know Aldo Novo, and I also know his drummer, who you have had in your band, Saints and Sinners, and that's Angie Curico. So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they're both great guys.
So when I was working with Aldo back in the 90s, we did an album called Saints and Sinners. And I co-wrote some songs with Aldo on the album. One day I came to him with the song Someday that I had just written. And it was about, I lost my father very young, at a young age. I was 8 years old. My dad died suddenly of an aneurysm to the brain. He was a musician. My mom was singing in his band. So everything turned around him. And so when he died, the world collapsed. We had to rebuild ourselves. It took years and years. And when my first child was born, it was like payback. It was like if God had sent me a child. You know what I'm saying? To equalize. So the song is about that. It doesn't say it. You have to read between the lines. But it's about losing my father, but later in life, having a child, my first child. I was very, very emotional the day my first child was born. Very, very. I was thinking about my father a lot. So a couple of weeks after, I started to write that song, Someday. So when Aldo heard it, he was doing his album with the Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi was producing Aldo's album, and Aldo was producing mine. So I played him, and he says, wait. I said, what? He says, I love that song. He says, if you allow me, I'll have John hear it, and if he likes it, and you agree, I'll put it on my album. I says, okay, yeah, that'd be great. I wanted to put it on Saints and Sinners album, but I had plenty of good songs that Aldo had already written. So I was more than happy to say yes, So next day, he calls me and he says, John loves it. It's going to be on the album. Thank you, Rick. And by the way, he wants to return the favor. He's going to write a song for you. So John wrote a song that's on the Saints and Sinners album. It's called Kiss the Bastard. John Bon Jovi. That's rock and roll, eh? So the song went into their hands when Aldo was ready to do his album, and they rewrote the song, Aldo and John. So they call me from the studio. They say, hey, Rick, you got to listen to the song. We changed some parts. We changed some lyrics. I says, great, I'm sure it's better, but John Bon Jovi and Aldo Nova working on one of my songs. And yes, they made it better. So we split the song, but it started with me. So if you look up Aldo's album, Blood on the Bricks, you're going to see Someday, written by Rick Hughes, Bon Jovi, Aldo Nova. So when it was time to do my album, Redemption, I said to my manager, I said, it's about redemption. This song means a lot to me because I wrote it for my father and my first child. So I want to redo it, but the way I wrote it, with the change they did, but the way I wrote it and the way I sang it on the demos is different from what they did, So we took part of the old demo and we took all the changes that they added to the song, and I did my version. So that's the story about Someday.
That's amazing. I didn't know any of that. But when I looked at the paper, those two songs popped out at me, and I was like, wow, I have to ask about these. It's very interesting the way you were inspired, reflecting on the memory of your father and then reflecting on the memory of becoming a father. As you tell that story, I almost felt like there was like a third part of it because Aldo was working with you. Bon Jovi's kind of in the background of it. It's almost as if they took the song and all three of you kind of fathered that song into something else. It's really interesting because they could have not used it or they could have changed it and lost the whole momentum of the song. But in its own way, it really feels like it was fathered into like a new baby. A lot of guys talk about writing songs and the songs are their babies, So do you see that almost as a reflection as well?
Well, the way you've put it is beautiful. I never thought of it that way, and that's exactly what it is. Earlier, when I was talking about it, I hadn't thought about these things for a while, so I became emotional just talking about it. My father, my first child. I don't know if you could feel it, but I really did. I had to compose myself because, there's some stuff like that. I'm not ashamed of being emotional, but sometimes you don't want to show your emotions, so I kind of laid back. But yeah, it's so true what you just said, because listen to how weird it is when I wrote that song, like I said, I lost my father, so we had to rebuild ourselves. My mom, who was an Italian immigrant, her parents were Italian immigrants, raised us alone on the salary of a waitress. And as you can see, she did a good job. My mom was loving and everything. So when I started to make music, nobody was rich in my family, but I wanted to have my own family. So by doing it, by saying yes, I did not know that I was starting something big, because the song in question became a hit on Aldo's album. And I wanted to buy a house, but I was a musician here in Quebec, All my friends would buy a house, but us musicians, you know how it is, huh? You get paid and it's tough to become rich if you want to be an artist. It's really tough. So the first check I got for the royalties for that song is the down payment for my first house. Imagine that. I was able to build my first house with the song I wrote about my father and my daughter. And that's something, huh?
That is amazing. That is really, really amazing. And the key to this that I find so powerful is that you said that your dad passed suddenly, which I know in grief is one of the most difficult passings. Sudden deaths are always very difficult because the family doesn't feel like they have closure or they were prepared for it in any sort of a way. But the piece of this that to me is so powerful is that you mentioned your dad was a musician. He comes through in the power of a song, which to me makes that twice as powerful because, his effort seemed to be suddenly stopped. His music stopped, but you carried it on for him. That to me is just like a double honor. So your first child, are they musical as well?
They're very artistic, but my daughter, which was the firstborn I keep talking about, is an artist, but she's not a musician, but she is an artist. My son is an artist too, but he's not a musician. I'm so proud of them. They're good kids. And listen, about my father, what you just said is true. This I never heard before. And it's true what you're saying, that sudden death leaves a really large hole. I was 8 years old and he died in front of his family. He came back from work one night with a headache, and I woke up in the middle of the night. My mother was crying. I was 8 years old. My father was on the floor. Next time I saw it, he was in a coffin. So you imagine what it left, you know? What it did to me is that from that day on, I no longer had a boss. My mom couldn't tell me what to do. I mean, music saved my life. It really did. At 12 years old, I grabbed a guitar and I started to learn songs for my mom because she didn't have a guitar player anymore.
That's incredible. So she was still singing, your mom.
Yeah. So
Wow.
when we would go out after my father had passed and all the craziness that came, we would go out, and sometimes people would pick up a guitar and start to play, and my mom would become so happy. She would sing. And to me, that was it, you know, to see her happy. That's why I learned the guitar. That's why.
That's amazing the way you tell that story, because guitar is very difficult. A lot of the guys that I talk to, a lot of them start around that age, around 11, 12 years old. Many of them say it was hard for them to stick to it because there's so many distractions at that age. It's really impactful that you knew that that was almost like your invisible job. Like you knew you had to keep playing and practicing so that you could accompany your mom. That was your motivation. The distractions go away at that point because your mother was number one. And that's really beautiful. You're really a beautiful human being, because I could think of so many youngsters that would just be like, oh, well, so what, whatever, But that takes a lot of inner strength. And you think you got the strength from your father when your mom reflected on many stories about who your dad was in reflection of her adult stories and memories of him?
Yeah. Growing up, the biggest compliment that I received was when we would go into the family of my father, and people would look at me with gazing eye going, "You're the double of your father. You resemble him so much." A couple of years ago, I was with one of his brothers that I haven't seen in years, and he was beside me. And my father died. He was 29, and I was in my 50s, and he was crying. He was saying, "It's like I'm beside my brother." Can you imagine?
Yes, yes. And I'm sure your personalities are probably similar too, because I've heard that before when someone says, oh, you're a double. A lot of times people say mannerisms are also the same. Like, oh, you move your hands around the way dad did, or my brother did, or, you gesture, or there's certain things that I call body language that some people feel are learned. Other times the body language I feel comes from genetics. Somebody could say, oh, I'm going to lay down and I put my hand behind my head. And then you go back and say, well, that's the way my dad would lay, with my hand behind my head. Like certain things come genetically and you don't know how you learn them, So that's very interesting.
You want me to give you a good example of that?
Yes.
I'm a lover of dogs. What I was talking about, at 12, I pick up a guitar, start to play guitar. At 13 years old, I stopped going to school because I had to go to work like my other brother to help my mom pay the rent and pay the electric bill, because back then they would cut you if you didn't pay. Winter, summer, no, you don't pay, you don't get it. And at 14 years old, I got home with a dog. My mom said, "What is that?" I said, "It's my dog." So since then, I've always had dogs. Now, listen, I have a border collie. Border collie are the ones that with the sheep, they surround the sheep, I go to the dog park with him almost every day. Today it's my wife that went because we were doing the interviews. And when he arrives at the dog park, everybody starts to laugh. They go, "Oh, Billy's coming to work." Because as soon as he get in the park, he surrounds them. He never seen sheep in his life. And he surrounds them and he pushes them and they start to run and he runs after them like he's doing his job. There you go, genetics. He never saw a sheep in his life, but he still, as soon as he sees other dog, he pretends they're sheep and he's the wolf. So funny.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
That is really incredible. I wanted to go back to one more point about your dad because you really have me fascinated. What kind of music was he doing with your mom? What was their band like? What was that type of music? Was it jazz? What was their kind of style?
My dad's idol was Elvis. My mom, when my dad died, she was the biggest Elvis fan in the world. I mean, I love Elvis because of my mom. You know, I know all his song. I play his song live. I love Elvis. And my dad was a big fan of Elvis. So his repertoire was around Elvis Presley's material, you know, the pop rock that was mainstream at that time too was his repertoire. He was a rock and roller like me.
That is really awesome. And I had heard that you're a big fan of Johnny Hallyday, which happens to be the Canadian Elvis. And I had not heard of him. And I said, well, before the interview, I want to listen to Johnny. And I listened to him and I listened to his song, Marie. I think he has a song named Laura, Marie, all like women names for the songs, you know, and he's singing in French. So obviously I don't know what the words are saying, but he very much reminded me of an Italian singer that I used to listen to in the early 1990s, and it was Eros Ramazzotti. And the style and the tone of his voice, and it's very romantic. There's like a romanticness to Johnny that I don't think Elvis always has that. Elvis has more of a serious sound to his voice, but Johnny really captures that romantic sound. Like you feel like you're falling in love with his voice. Was your dad also a fan of Johnny, or was that more something that you discovered?
No, my mom was a fan of Johnny Hallyday. Yeah, I discovered him later. Yeah, my mom loved every kind of music. At home, we would listen to Elvis, Janis, Led Zeppelin, French stuff from Quebec. She was very broad. She loved disco, rock, hard rock. She was a real Italian. Italians are like that. They go with the feeling. If it sounds good, it's good. No matter what style.
That's awesome. That's amazing. So if you just bring me back to the early 80s, because I know a lot of the audience remembers your band Sword, and that's when you kind of made your debut. Tell me kind of about that, like in more particular, like how you really felt like being a new artist, and then how it was like being in the 80s. Because a lot of the guys that come on this show, their stories, Motley Crue and all this stuff, like there was so many things happening at that time. The business was just on fire. So what was your experience when you first came in with Sword?
Well, we got very lucky with Sword because first of all, the drummer in the band is my brother, my big brother. So after my dad passed, him and I went to work when we were a teen. And so we bought our own instruments and we had to find ourselves a place to rehearse. And we were 15, 16 years old. We found Mike LaRock, who plays in Sword, because we were hang out together. By the way, I was in a Sword rehearsal last night because I'm doing a show with Sword on the 18th of October. So we've been best friends all our lives, the four of us. So my brother and I, we would be in line at the record store to buy the new Alice Cooper album, you know, and come home and listen to it and go, oh my God, this is good. School's out and all that stuff. And then the new Led Zeppelin, the new Pink Floyd, and we'd be in line. And then we'd go see shows. We'd be in line to buy the tickets. And then we'd be like 10th row in the back of the forum, but we still had a great time. And fast forward 5, 10 years after, we're on stage opening for Metallica, for Alice Cooper. I remember one time I was with my brother backstage and we were waiting to go on. And I said, Dan, Dan. And he looked at me because I've always been the leader, you know. He's a bit older than me, but if I like dogs, I'm the pit bull and he's the Labrador, you know, he's the fluffy dog. He's the kind dog. I'm the, let's go. So I said, Dan, and he said, yeah. I said, look, and there was like 10,000 people. I says, this is what we dreamed when we were kids. It's happening. We did it, bro. So I remember that moment like it was yesterday. My brother looked at me and I saw a tear.
That's amazing. So how did it feel for you? I mean, to get picked up, like, you know, opening is one thing, but then you had your album and you got involved with the record companies. Like, what was that experience like? You know, a lot of people like to know kind of the behind the scenes. Like, for some people, it's very easy. They just walk through the whole process. Other times people are fighting about songs or fighting about things in their contracts and stuff. So what was the experience like for you?
It was very pleasant. I only have fond memories of all of it. With Sword, we were with a Montreal-based company called Aquarius Record. They had April Wine. They had some good artists on the roster. So we were signed with Aquarius Record. We were with them for 10 years. Even when I did Saints and Sinners, was with Aquarius Record. I only have good memories of it. I mean, people that work for record labels are as passionate about music as a musician themselves. That's why they're there. Of course, you hear sometimes stories of people who felt that they were not treated right but not me. I don't let anybody not treat me right. So no,
That's
I
great.
only have good memories of that time. Yeah.
That's great. I know it's interesting because when you move into Saints and Sinners, we're moving into like the early 90s. And that's kind of like a critical time in music because music really kind of turned a corner once you get the grunge and stuff. So you were able to kind of get in that record before things kind of drastically changed. So that's when you started working with Angie and other people in the band. So tell me about Saints and Sinners.
It was short-lived because, like you said, when we recorded the album, it's just before the grunge movement. So when it came out, we had a year, and that's 92. And 93, grunge took all the space. So it was a blessing in disguise. Because I remember back then, when it happened, I was like almost crying in my beard, you know, saying, wow, you know, nobody wants hard rock anymore. So what am I going to do right now? You know, I don't want to I've become grunge. I'm not from Seattle. I'm from Quebec. I'm not an imposter. You know, I have to stay true to my roots. So what I did is that I stepped back. My firstborn was born in 89. My son in 92. So in 93, that happened. So I stepped back and I said, okay, so now let's raise my child. Let's build a family and put some man into the man, you know? So I did that. So I from 93 to 2003, I worked on plenty of stuff. I did some musical reviews. I worked for TV shows as a hired gun. I would sing for musical shows that would appear every week on TV. I was behind the scene, but it's my voice you would hear. I would do jingles. And so I did that for 10 years. I didn't have to tour. It helped me to raise my family. In a way, I'm grateful that it happened because I was there for the most crucial time for my kids when they were very, very young and they had to have a father in their life. So if I would have been on the road all the time, it would have been very different. So I remember back then, it was like a tragedy for me. But now I think about it, and it's been a while that I came to this conclusion that it was the best thing that could have happened, that I stepped back from music for a while and go behind the scene and just raise my kids.
Yes, I find life very interesting. Sometimes we make moves, and sometimes life makes moves. That's an example of life making a move. You know, it's kind of like, I'm not in control here, I'm not in the driver's seat here. And I've heard that from other musicians, and in some way very reflective, like you, saying that it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because the music business is tough. So if it's not the music that is difficult, it's the lifestyle and it's many other things that happen along the way. You've been extremely blessed to be working with the names like Motorhead and Metallica and all of those bands. And doing my research for speaking with you, I saw that you're playing with Rudy Sarzo. He's one of my favorites. Tell me about the new lineup, because there's a lot of articles people are writing about you now saying that you've brought back one of the lineups that Ozzy had originally. So I know a lot of the audience may remember those guys that were on one of the Ozzy albums, and that's where Rudy is tucked into that.
I have a lot of gratitude toward Brad Gillis, because Brad Gillis made everything happen. I'm the vector, but it all started when I talked to my manager and I said, okay, I'm able to write songs, but I would like to have outside writers write for me. So they will write stuff that I'm not able to write. So he says, okay, let me check around. So he went to a friend of ours. His name is Jesse Bradman. He played in Saints and Sinners with Angie Curcio. He was a keyboard player, good friends with Brad Gillis. So we talked to Jesse. He says, well, you know what? Brad and I wrote a couple of songs that would be perfect for Rick. I heard the song and I said, oh yeah, I want those songs. So it started that way. So when it was time to record The Real Me, I said to my manager, I said, you know what would be good? If we do that song, if we get top players. He says, like who? I says, well, for one thing, let's ask Brad. We already have him. So we asked Brad, and that's when the idea came to reunite it with Tommy and Rudy. So by the grace of God, I keep thanking my lucky star, which is probably my dad. It happened. It happened. Imagine that, 36 years, I think. They haven't played. They haven't been together for a project. And they did it for me. Oh, my God. I was so in awe with them when I was a kid that when it happened, I said, wow, I really have a lucky star. So it was one thing to get them to play on the album, but to get them to be in a video, that's another thing. That's even harder, because I'm in Canada, I'm in Quebec, they're in Los Angeles, they're all over the place. So we found a studio in Castle Studios in Burbank, 3D technology. So we found that place, and then we went back to Brad and we said, do you think the other guys would be able? He says, let me talk to them and we'll see. And it happened. So on the day of the shooting, I was there at the Castle Studio. We were preparing stuff. Tommy was the first that got here. Tommy Aldridge. Hi, Tommy. I'm a big fan of Tommy Aldridge. And he was so kind. I mean, it's hard to explain. These guys, we were meant to play at least one song together. So Tommy got it first. Brad got in second. So I was really, really happy to finally meet him, because we worked long distance, for the album. And when Rudy got in, I mean, this guy, he's got an aura. And his aura is by being gentle, by being soft-spoken. Some people got aura because, hey, whoa, no, buddy, you see that guy's he's the opposite. He brings attention to himself just by being gentle, being, this guy played with Dio, Ozzy, now with Quiet Riot. I mean, one of the best hard rock band in the world. And he comes in and he's like, regular guy. Hi, Rick. Nice to meet you. He was with his wife. She had a dog in her hand. I love dogs. But you're right about Rudy. You're right to kind of idolize him, because he's the real deal. He really is.
Oh, and let me tell you, I have like a very side story about Rudy. I have a very close cousin that I grew up with that was like a brother to me. And we always had 16, 17 years old. We would always talk about Ozzy Osbourne. You know, we were always comparing what songs we liked and everything. And about, I have to say, 3 years ago, he came down with a cancer. And everybody was shocked. Like, it came very sudden and everything. And he had to go through treatment and surgery and the whole thing. And I said, how can I help him? And I went to Cameo. And I sent a message and said I was going to buy a message from Rudy. And I was just like, I just wrote one sentence, he's going through cancer treatment and you can't give a lot of information with the Cameo, And when he got it, I mean, the response from him and his wife was incredible because Rudy actually, and it was shared with me, the video, Rudy said, his name and I wish you the best during a treatment. And then he took him on a tour around his house and showed him the gold albums that he had on the wall and, talked about different albums and different songs and stuff. And I thought, wow, that's incredible because that's exactly what he was. Like, my cousin's like a big fan. And I have to say that at that Who concert recently, my cousin was with me. And he was celebrating 3 years since that whole thing started. So, I always say Rudy was your medicine. But that's an incredible story, that he,
I hear you.
It's just really, sometimes you just don't know where the message is going to come from. And Rudy was so powerful in being very motivational, like, don't let this get you down kind of a thing.
Wow, that's very touching. And in my book, that's what I call generosity, because just for the fact that he did it and that he showed it his place, to give your cousin a purpose, not a purpose, but to let him know that he matters to him, that's called generosity. It's very generous.
Yes, it's amazing. So I'm excited about your song. We're going to roll out with your song, The Real Me. Are you going to take the guys on the road? What's the plan?
Oh, they're pretty busy. Everybody's doing their stuff, Brad's with Night Ranger, and they're doing amazing. I follow them on the net, and their shows is incredible. Rudy's with Quiet Riot, same thing. They're flying high, very good. So, no, there's no plan to be touring with them. But, hey, I got a lucky star, remember?
That's right.
So,
that's right.
I'm a believer. And I just want to mention one thing, is to invite anybody that is listening right now to go and check out the video. And it's very easy to find. You do Rick Hughes Official on YouTube, and they'll find the video.
Yes, and it's great. I've seen it. Really wonderful. So tell me how we can reach you by social media. What's the best way for the fans to check you out?
Social media, I'm very Facebook. So I got an official Rick Hughes Facebook page with Facebook, Instagram, and I have a rickhughes.co webpage. They can reach me through my webpage too.
Okay, great. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more about you. I'm very excited. I want to thank you again, first of all, for being an incredible human being, because you are. And you shared a lot about your life and about your talents, and most importantly, about your dad and the memory that he has brought you in your music business as well. So thank you again. I want to tell our audience to check out the song that's being released by you, The Real Me, Redemption. Thank you again, Rick Hughes.
Thank you so much. You're so kind to me.
Thank you.
Can you see the real me?
You have been listening to Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium, Dream Central Station, LLC. My audio editor is Al Hemberger at the Loft Recording Studios in Bronxville, New York. This is WNEW 102.7 FM radio.